Hi all. Let us sum up to some degree the Facilitator course and potential our work as facilitators of the Subsidiary Timeline. Some of you might feel that your work is oriented towards other people, and as you have completed Module 1, Set 1 and 2, and Module 2, you will discover that on the Subsidiary Timeline, assisting others is no longer part of the journey as we move through the stages of the Subsidiary Timeline. Yes, on the first stage, we are still in between worlds, and with that, we are still trying to the best of our abilities to assist the ones that we care about, the people that is around us, the prospect of humanity, whatever that is. Humanity, when we think of humanity and we're doing this for humanity, who we're actually doing it for, a sum of projections, a sum of ideas, perhaps even a program, perhaps something that is not really what it's supposed to be. And I do think there are some truths to the ancient stories of the other facilitators that's gone before us, trying to facilitate and give over what was to be given from the Subsidiary Timeline to the ones that were still standing, not sure if they wanted to take the step into the Subsidiary Timeline. What is the Subsidiary Timeline? You should know by now. It's the path of evacuation. It's the evacuation or the path of liberation out of the enclosure. So the challenges to keep us away from it is, of course, large, big, overwhelming, and will be played out to whatever degree possible. When we step onto it, we have barely begun the path, but we're there where we can begin to see everything that we must let go of, and all the things we have let go of to come so far will become insignificant in the current future, whatever will come, understanding of what we can and cannot do. Some of the things we must respect and learn as we walk along the path is that we can help on some level. We can be the first of many on some levels. And we can be there for the ones we care about on some levels. We can be there for the weird projection we call humanity to some degree. And we are doing our very best to get to the point where we understand what true service to others actually mean and what it truly means to be the first of many. To be the path in ourselves as an exemplification, and that understanding the limitations of what it means to be a facilitator. We have learned about co-creation in Module 2, where the text material gave us the foundation and the traditional aspect of what it means to co-create and all the hopeful projects that we want to engage on and take part of and become part of, in, with, however you want to put it. In the teachings and the different discussions and the insights and the explanations are given in Module 2 on a higher level, takes it into a more realistic level of understanding. Of course, you can say that working with reality from the angle I have, from the understanding I have, is not the same as the one you have. And that's very important to acknowledge that. Whatever you step onto the path with will be the last stages of your own journey. My journey was to come into this universal structure as part of the internal strife, assist in the less progressive universal matrix, the whole creation of the technologies and what was to be done there, as an overseer, as an engineer, and as a scientist. It was also part of my work to facilitate the changes that were necessary for the ones that were left behind, and with that began to collaborate with different groups, different factions, different levels of the ones that were left behind as part of the Pillar Project. The Pillar Project, as we know, got changed as the timeline event hit the less progressive universal structure and set us all back in time from where it was no longer just about the ones that were left behind and a new set of ideas of assisting everyone and giving second chances. That was not part of the original reality field configuration, hence the internal strife, when it was obvious that the ones from the previous universal cycles, yet again, had not lived up to the requirements. And the question was, leave them behind or continue? Different facilitators, because that's a facilitator too, chose to go into the less progressive universal structure. And with that, assist the ones that needed a second chance, another cycle, another set of cycles, but in a slower pace to truly understand what it is that they were to achieve. Sciences were made, inventions were made, and stupidity flourished along these sciences and these inventions, leading to the timeline event. We have talked about this many times, and as things grew progressively more difficult, and the sciences did not lead to the outcome as expected, it became more and more blurred what it actually meant to be a true facilitator of the ancient teachings and the original ways of how to be an advanced solar system civilization. It just faded away, out of sight, out of mind, and the new took over. After the timeline event, the gap became too big. It was too difficult to build bridges, and perhaps the ones that were left felt like stranded in a matrix of artificiality, where some saw opportunities and others saw devastation. However, we tried to the best of our abilities. I was taken off the project due to my ways of looking at things and ended up in the Andromeda system in a type of exile. The rest just continued here with a lot of other choices that led to more disasters and less progression and less viability rate. And at some point, for whatever reason it was, perhaps when it began to ring too untrue or another version of me or whatever, there are gaps in my memory as well. I ended up back in here, whether or not that story is true or interception, manipulation, deception, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. I'm here, I'm trying to make head and tail of what I know and what I remember and what I'm supposed to do. So what can I facilitate? I can facilitate my knowledge. I can tell what I have experienced. I can create frames of references and try to explain in meta perspective as an overarching generalization of what it means to get through the transition, through the transformations, first transformation, then transition, then transmutation, and then transcendence. And as you know from the last podcast of Module 2, transcendence is where we end when we get to stage 4 as part of the path of liberation. So on the path of liberation, we're repeating pillar 1, 7, 2, 8, 3, 9, 4, 10, 5, 11, and 6, 12. These are 6 stages, and we are, as we go first through the first, there's a lot of things that needs to be let go of yet again. As we go into stage 2, there's a lot of the otherness that we have to revise and think over twice, and then again understand what we can and cannot do. Stage 3, co-creation, the law of participation, also teaches us what to do. And stage 4, the law of reciprocity, what should be given, what should not be given, and all of these things are part of Module 1 and Module 2. So these are the first 4 stages that are exemplified, explained, and taught in Module 1, first and second set, and Module 2. With that, from there, we go into stage 5 or step 5, and that is, as we know, true science, true knowledge, inner knowledge, and the path where we stand sovereign in our own sciences that are suitable for our continued journey to reconnect with our higher order potentials of who and what we truly were and who and what we can become now, and what is left and what must be left behind yet again. Each step of the path, each step of the path of liberation goes through different stages, goes through different sets of experiences, and goes through different levels of understanding of transformation, transition, transmutation, and transcendence. You see, as part of the path of liberation, we all end at that point with transcendence, where everything we are, know, understand, must be left behind, including ideas of what we can and cannot do for, quote unquote, the idea of humanity. We recognize that humanity, or whatever we project into that weird concept, is yet again a dream, an illusion, something we create. We decide what humanity is. We decide what humanity isn't. We decide what humanity can become. Or we decide what humanity can't become. My journey has been about a project that I felt was not conducive from the get-go, and yet I still participated in it. Sin in hindsight, I probably should have said no to the appointed option I got from the councils. I should have said, no, I can see this lead nowhere. And with that, I was drawn to the situations that fulfilled that prophecy from the get-go. Perhaps if I had been less reluctant and had been more as in, yes, this is a good idea, then perhaps whatever I would have experienced would not have been all the situations that led to failure, but perhaps all the situations that led to success. Who knows? Who knows how great an impact we have with our projections and ideas of outcome. Perhaps I was put there because that needed to play out. Perhaps I was appointed because exactly I could play out the failing timeline as part of the LPU, where others might participate in the succeeding timelines of the LPU. Who knows? Perhaps there was some kind of a portion must be led to failure, another portion must be led to success. The portion that was led to failure still needed facilitators to lead them out. Perhaps that's what the facilitators in the end was appointed to do. Perhaps the Buddha was the facilitator of his lineage for the last group before the entire timeline of his lineage collapsed and ceased to have any viability rate. Perhaps Jesus or Joshua was the last of his lineage. And I know for a certainty that I am the last of my lineage. And with that, I can turn off the light, shut things up, and switch off whatever is continuing my consciousness potentials as the last of my lineage. And that's transcendence too, letting go of a universal project as the big co-creators of an advanced, complex experiment of which some, perhaps not, were led to success by the ones that guided them. And others that were destined to fail had those of us within them that constantly tried to push them to perfection, constantly tried to aid them to pick up and do what they needed to do, and constantly were met with the fact that that is not possible. Because how would they even be able to do that if they couldn't do it in the perfect worlds of all worlds, in the perfection of all perfection, and in the progression of all progression, even couldn't do it there? Then how would they do it in something that was less perfect? How would they even do it in something with less viability rate? So perhaps there was this overarching, weird, hidden plan, as I'm thinking about it now, that knew it wouldn't be a success. Because what I have experienced, including with Inner Earth, and the whole, you can do this and then you can get the technology, you can do this and then you get the imprints, you can do this and then this and this and this. And it all comes down to at the end, we realize every single time, no matter what's given and granted from the external forces, it all comes down to us as the facilitator of the sciences and the rules and the laws and what is possible and what is not from the code sequences of the subsidiary timeline. The LPU had limitations as well, so it's like reaching for the heavens without there actually was any heaven. Perhaps it was meant to go that way. Perhaps it was this elaborate, really weird scheme of saying, well, we can't leave them behind, So we're putting them into a secondary type of universe, the LPU, where they can play out again. And if that doesn't work, well, then they will segregate or they will lead to their own disaster. And then the other group had done what they should. They had done a given over. They have created the possibility for it. They had honored the laws of the cycles and they had done their part. As we have seen with the ones that are leaving, every time the giving over, this is what you need, this is what you can do, and this is what you have to play with. And yet again, just to discover that it's not a match to our configuration. It's not a match to original consciousness potentials. And then it just fades away, turns into dust, and ceases to exist. Will there be another recreation out of the chaos waters, as it said in the book of Genesis? And the answer will be not within the alignment of the progressive worlds. There will be new worlds that will arise from the chaos for a while until there are no viability rate left. And then the third cycle and everything that's connected to it will be pulled into the abyss and there will be a complete annihilation. The potential futures that leads to the battle between good and evil will thereby not be possible, because as we're heading now with the closing of inner earth and with the externalization of whatever's left of the technology for us who can carry it, it's like the final exit for those who participated in the LPU, the final stages of complete understanding of what we can and cannot do, and that the constant giving second chances, the constant trying to change something that in its core doesn't want to be changed, should be let go of. And that's part of our transformation, transition, transmutation, and finally transcendence, where we acknowledged, now we have done our part, we have given over, and you that are doing the facilitator, you will get through the stages where you too will have completed a project that is required to understand what true service to others actually mean, what is possible and what is not, and not lingering on the old dream that everybody can change, everybody can live to their true potentials, and everybody should have that chance. Of course, it goes without saying, but not on the behalf of those who can, of those who will, and those who actually has the potentials to do so. If we constantly stay behind, like the Bodhisattva, keeping the door open for all to enter through, and not at some point look at whatever is left and saying, well, at some point, even though that the door is open, doesn't mean that anybody will go for it. Even though we keep giving, and even though we keep giving over, and even though we keep producing and doing what we can to assist and help, if there's nothing to work with, if there is nothing to progress, if there's nothing to push forward, other than just the dream of pushing forward, the dream of being a human that can progress, the dream of the possibility of a potential, perhaps, then we must also recognize that even those of us who keep the door open, we at some point must close it as well, especially when we recognize with the last of our lineage. And then it's just a matter of saying, I've done what I could. I have created what I could with my knowledge, my sciences. I have built, I have shared, I have given, and I've given it freely. And it's out there now for free, most of it, except from this last little piece that at some point in the future, of course, also will be given for free as we move forward to more forward and hastily stepping towards 2029, where there will be another great division. So those of you who are here in the facilitator test group, as well as doing it either as a course or as part of the 3 meetups with a bunch of people, a group of people that have chosen to do the test group and see what we can talk about and how we can understand the sciences and what it means to be a facilitator. The importance is to understand to some degree, we can teach others how to get to the path of liberation. We can facilitate teachings that can assist them to the door, to the gate, where they will learn what to do and how to get through the door, through the eye of the needle. Does it sound familiar? That's because it's been taught many times. Each time our civilization or groups of civilization goes through a threshold between what was and what potentially could be, and each time we get less viability rate, there has always been facilitators that comes forth and try to teach, speak the truth, and share what is to be known before they too will leave, because the reality is no longer in alignment with who and what they are. And they know to their core that this is their last civilization, this is the last incarnation, this is the last time around. They're not leaving with hands above their head in happiness. They're leaving in sadness, and they are in sorrow and in pain over all of the losses and everything that didn't come to be. And that you find in all of their teachings, including the anger and the reluctance of wanting to do so, because since it has not worked so far, why should it even work again? But it's part of the laws, it's part of the cycles. As Inner Earth did what they could, as the different groups that are part of the LPU have done, and as I have done as well, before we move into the 5th stage of the path of liberation, where only we can walk. Perhaps you will get there too, and then you will do the same transcendence, where only you can walk your path, your timeline, and your version of what it means to complete who and what you were from the beginning, and who and what you have become here at the end. So that's the 5th level, the true sciences and the true knowledge. Does this then mean that we will stop being part of the world? Of course not. Does this then mean we'll stop producing something that could be a benefit for other people? Of course not. But the idea of salvation, the idea of assisting others to become something, the idea of producing something for others so they can grow, that's part of the LPU. That's the core foundation of the LPU. And that too must be transcended into the understanding that we can do so much for this vast group, this weird conundrum of quote-unquote humanity, the otherness, what is out there. And we learn that whatever we come in contact with, we give energy, we imprint, we change it to some degree. But there are limitations. If they don't want to change, we can't change anything. We can only give so much. When we learn, now is enough. Now you have given all you can. If you continue to give, you will begin to break the laws and actually do something that creates more distortion. How much should be given? How little should be given? These are part of the true and correct use of power and the true and correct use of energy. That follows with the last stages of who and what we are, where we have completed all of the cycles, all of the possibilities, generated all of the sciences, done everything we could within the scope of the LPU. You see, the last big wheel, the last big cross, that's the one of the cosmos. The large, overarching cross of the LPU, with all of its 12 spokes, the 12 lineages, and the 12 original lineages that once were, that moved on, and the 12 lineages that had not made it, so to speak, or a representation of them as part of the LPU and as part of the Pillar Project. So the Pillar Project was my first cross, from which I have done the transformation, the transition, the transmutation, and now the transcendence. The next big cross is the cross of the cosmos, or the understanding of the universal structure as it is, and the understanding of where it's going. And I've seen that. I saw that many, many years ago. And I understand that, and that's a hard one to swallow. That's a hard one to let go. The Pillar Project and what I participated in was easier because I knew it was super distorted. And like my body, it had no longer any purpose. Am I dying? Of course not. But this body lasts for so long, right? It's got however many years on its back. Old age is coming, and that's a fact. Death will come inevitably. Nobody's immortal. And so with the Pillar Project. And that's why I'm here to finalize this. My version inside the Pillar Project, whatever's left of it. The higher levels of it, whatever I participated in. And now with Inner Earth and their pull-out, there will be no more to sustain it whatsoever. The ones that participated are long gone. The ones that upheld it are now also gone. And I, in this version, cannot uphold anything. I'm just human, more human than ever. And just looking at the last pieces of my work here, and that is what's left of my lineage and what's left of my original consciousness potentials and what to do with them. And that's part of the cosmic cross, the 12 lineages that were mirrored in the LPU. I can assure you that the top level, the 3 top level, 10, 11, and 12, they are no longer there. They're long gone as well. So we have what we could say between lineage 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9. 9 is also abandoned. That's why it's only technology left. The third lineages, so to speak, 1, 2, and 3, that's Inner Earth. They're gone as well. So we have 4 and 5. They're artificial, turning into androids and insects. Lineage 5 is now part of the Atlantean timeline, whatever that means. Lineage 6, not many left of them. 7, Arcturians, they are also turning into androids. 8, that's the dark galactic core of the dark forces that are part of the Orion system. And as I said, lineage 9. So it doesn't look as if what's left of the cosmic cross, the cosmic wheel with its spokes, have any more fuel. And that too will stop, as if the core of the galaxy will no longer twist and turn once the Andromeda technology is no longer upholding that. So we are living on the last fumes of technology that gives us so and so long before that too no longer will work. And then it will dismantle the spokes of the cosmic wheel that no longer will twist and turn, and that will stay stagnant. And once that happens, there's only one way for what's left of the third universal cycle groups and their lineages and what they were and what they became. That is to separate and turn into what's left and use that until they too, as everything else, will meet their demise. What will continue will be beyond our scope of understanding. I think it's prudent here as a facilitator to know that these are the outcomes, so we don't delude ourselves to believe that we are more than we are, so we don't suffer from some kind of savior complex, where we think that just because we're doing this, then that grants us the permission to evade the laws of the cycle. The true use of power is also to know when to stop and when to let go and when to give over and when to seclude. And if you know and if you have read, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the time of death. Death can take many forms. Death of higher order consciousness can take form long before the physical vessel stops and cease to exist. Do I let go of my higher order potentials? Yes, everything that is connected to the Pillar Project no longer serves any purpose and must thereby go into forgetfulness. I've done the giving over in the whole Academy courses, and it's there for those who can use it as long as it holds a viability rate, which at some point also will be depleted from the material itself. At the end, we only have our own energy system. We are the main facilitators of what the path, the subsidiary path, can grant us. And we will learn to retract and protect and stay in that very, very subtle, kind space of the subsidiary timeline, what's left of the Andromedan technologies, and learn to use our power in the correct manner, to continue our journey inside this reality field for as long as possible. Not to hold the door for others, not to assist others in doing what they should do, because we will learn as we go further down the path of liberation. Our energies will become more and more subtle. Our bodies will suffer more and more under these subtle energies. It will demand more and more just to keep us going every day. And that kindness and nurturing should be focused on our own last stages of our existence, with the ones we care about in scenarios that is important to us. And in that way, we will leave the LPU with some kind of degree of what we could call grace and kindness that will allow us to vanish, cease to exist, and leave the LPU for good. We won't go out as heroes. Few will remember us. There will be little left behind. What is left behind will most likely be distorted like everything else and all the other facilitators. And you will then ask, you that are doing this course or are participating in the test group, why should I do it then? Why should I try and become a facilitator? Well, if you chose to become a facilitator because you wanted to save humanity, you wanted to make a difference, if you wanted to still play the old rule book of the LPU, then it's because you have lessons to learn. You still have lessons to learn of what it means to transform. You still have lessons to learn about correct use of energy and consciousness, and what is possible and what is not. Because in a way we could say creating the LPU was not acknowledging the limitations within the lineages. It was not acknowledging that not all can, not all should, and how many chances should one lineage get, the first 3 lineages, that didn't make it from the previous universal cycles, that led to so much destruction in the previous universal cycles. How many chances should such a group get? Well, it's not because we become the judges, because we are not to judge others, as you rightfully know. But we created a whole structure, a whole new type of universe for these groups. And seen in hindsight, was it that very elaborate plan to create segregation to begin with? So it was kind of done in the most humane possible way, where there first was bridges, where there first was connection points, where there was travel, where there was possibilities, knowing that that would just become a broader path, more and more, a broader and bigger gap, a distance, a division that would continue until the division was so stark that those who were part of the old worlds that didn't make it into the new universal cycles would resume and merge with what they once were, as we have seen it with the main timeline that was been attempted to alter. So that had played out too, just to push it back into where we were at the beginning. That these groups can't change. Their consciousness is locked into specific patterns. Very few of them have changed. What has changed is all of us that participated in it, that were ready to move on, we chose to stay behind. And that sacrifice will never be leveled out or met with anything. So we can ask, why did we choose to do that? Did we do it through honor, or did we do it because we were ordered to do it? Why did we even do it if the outcome of success was so slim? Is we recognize as the fact that the chances of success were little to none. I don't know. That's perhaps part of my last level of the path, where I will recognize as I go into the different stages where I'm working with my own field and my own memories via the sciences, looking again at what was the chances of the transformational ability, if there is a word for that, of the LPU. What was the success rate? What was possible? And then come to terms with why I chose to participate. Because as we leave the LPU, we must connect to the beginning of when we entered. You see, that's the last cosmic cycle that we complete. And that's the one we step into in the two last stages of the path of liberation. As we have gone through past version of the beginning and the end of Pillar 1.7, the beginning and the end of Pillar 2.8, the beginning and the end of Pillar 3.9, the beginning and the end of Pillar 4.10 of governance of energy and consciousness and what it truly means. It doesn't mean to govern others. It means to govern our own fields and what we can and cannot do, and the limitation of the spaces that we participate in. The first three pillars, we are all eager to change ourselves, to change others, and to change the worlds we're part of. And in Pillar 4, we learn that governance, yes, it can be a collective means to an end, but at the end, it comes down to the individual. And as we retract and transcend governance and the true meaning of governance and go into the true sciences of what can and cannot be done, what is possible and what is not, we meet the beginning as we stepped into Pillar 5.11, what we began there, who we became there, and how we ended there, so the beginning and the end will meet up once more. Just to annihilate and let that go too. So all the first 4 cycles of who we were, who we became, and what we turned into, and what was possible and what was not, understanding these sciences of Pillar 1, 7, 2, 8, 3, 9, 4, 10, and 5.11 to their completion, we step into the last stages, stage 6 of the path of liberation, where we reunite with our lineage, who we were to begin with, and who we are as the last of our lineage. And we complete the cycles of who we were in the beginning of the universal cycles, and who we have become at the end of the universal cycles. And with that, we complete our lifetimes inside the LPU and leave the major cross, the cosmic cross, the cross of the LPU, and let that one go too, with all that we were, what we have become, and what we thought we could achieve as part of the LPU. Acknowledge what was, what is, and what truly is. You see, the end of all of the levels of the Pillar Project, as things are now, is to recognize things for what they truly are, to see things as they truly are, and to recognize what we truly are. And with that clarity, we let go of the last Trinity, and we become the ones that cease to exist altogether, and letting go of everything that we have been as part of the LPU. And as we extinguish all of the levels of our existences in all of the realms we've been part of from the beginning to the end, and let it all go and transcend and step into the last piece of the journey, the true death, the true transition, and the true transcendence into the complete unknown of a perhaps continuation or a perhaps no continuation. We recognize as facilitators in this time and on the subsidiary timeline that our goal, the greatest potentials, are the ones that are willing to let go and to understand what can and cannot be done. And with that humility, meeting what we were to begin with, that most likely didn't have that humility, but set out with grandeur, with ideas of what could or could not become, just to end very humble, very poor, with nothing at all, leaving with absolutely nothing, very little of our original structure, very little with our original goals, and very little of our original consciousness. that too is humbling. And I think that's why when we talk about the eye of the needle, and I have a little bit of Christian infusions today, apparently, that goes with the Syrians and their transgressions and what they have been trying to do, is to recognize that going through the eye of the needle, as I've talked about many times, is to let everything go. Everything is left behind. And what we'll leave with very little and be the path of the meek. It will be the path of the ones that have little. And yet they have achieved a prize that is beyond words. They have achieved a humility that I can say for a certainty the original lineages did not have. Will we meet up with the other ones that have elevated and continued? Perhaps. Perhaps our light will shine differently. Perhaps it will shine in a way that is equal to where they shine. Perhaps will we meet as spheres of light in the infinity sea of possibilities of who will continue. And our lineages, those who have succeeded, the LPU, have left humble, with little, with nothing. We will meet up with the ones that have achieved everything as a proper polarity, where they too, in their understandings of having been the ones that continued, have achieved what the original goals were. They too perhaps ended up in a place of humility, where they too recognized that there was no perfect path. There was no perfection to be reached. Perhaps we played a dangerous games, those who continued and those of us who stepped into the LPU. Perhaps we are here acknowledging with that humility that whatever we are, whatever we used to be, all of us that spilled over from the previous universal cycles, each and one of us, we had our own hybris or whatever you want to call it. We had our own shadows. We had our own ideas. We had our own type of inflation that we needed to recognize. The internal strife, both of those who continued and for those who stepped into the LPU, was flawed. It was just another representation of how the lineages, some saw themselves as better, some saw themselves as less. Some saw that they could, others felt they couldn't. And why did that even come to be? Right? So there's a lot of humility around the entire project. And that's the last cross, the cosmic cross. Stepping up, touching the center point with that humility and recognizing whatever must continue from here cannot be done from the angle of thinking that we know more or we know better or we know what to do. The laws of energy are harsh, direct, and they push us to our limitations, to our boundaries. They push us to acknowledge our limitations and then teach us how to put up our boundaries. They teach us how to stand sovereign and yet humble. It teaches us how to transform and yet transcend. It teaches us what we can and cannot do. And we learn that, and we have learned that, and we acknowledge that. And that gives a specific vibration. To what means, to what end, to what purpose, I don't know. We'll see when we meet on the other side. Perhaps our light will shine stronger. Perhaps our light will shine weaker. We don't know. Again, we will meet whatever comes our way as part of the path of liberation, knowing that the last two stages must be done within ourselves, with ourselves, and yet still exemplify what must be exemplified to complete the true science path, which are the true sciences of what it means to be an advanced civilization. And then the last stage will be where we are completely sovereign in that energy and that knowledge, and yet still with humility recognize that we have done what we could for others, for ourselves, for reality, for the LPU, and for the civilizations that came before, and potentially the civilizations that will come after. And we will always be facilitators as we transform energy and consciousness, whatever reality we are part of, as well as on the subsidiary timeline. We just understand to the core that once we step onto the subsidiary timeline, we are leaving behind not just who and what we were, not just about what we could become. We are leaving behind humanity. We are leaving behind the world. We are leaving behind the universe. And we are leaving behind the cosmos. And we let all of these levels of who and what we used to be, what we thought we would be or become, we let all of that go. And then in humility, let the last stages of the path show us what it is that we are to facilitate. Not because we want to do this or that or achieve this or that, but because this is what we get of information. And we will do that as the ones that are humble, the meek, as you have learned from Christianity. The kingdom awaits for those. The kingdoms of heavens awaits for those who are meek, who are willing, who have lost everything, and who are willing to continue to lose, to be able to gain what is within the realms of the heavens. And with that said, I will leave this little series of this course. Technically, this is the last podcast as part of the course material. And then we will have the group meetup where there will be given lectures for those who are participating. And that will also be put into this course material. And then that will be the facilitator education. And you might think, what was the point of all that? We began with all of these possibilities from inner earth that promised us, what do you call it, milk and honey, right? They promised us the promised land, that if only we did so and so, then that would happen, as we have heard so many times before. But we learn every time that being a facilitator of change, being a facilitator of transformation, being a facilitator of transition, being a facilitator of transmutation, and being a facilitator of transcendence is part of our overarching purpose and function. It's not about what we do for others. That plays a huge part, but it is just as much what we do for the universal structure and the civilizations that might or might not come after, but the ones that were before us and the ones that are now, as a concept of energy and consciousness. It's not a specific goal or a specific group or a specific civilization, as it's also been taught. It's not just the ones that are near to you or that is part of your current era of existence. It is the full cycle of everything there is and reuniting with everything there is with the right sense of purpose and the right function and the right understanding of our true place, whether it's as a facilitator on the subsidiary timeline or as a facilitator of the great cosmic schemes of transformation of consciousness and energy, or as the ones that no longer can continue, or as the ones that can continue. All of this doesn't matter. We are still always doing the best we can, clear as much as we can, and continue to do so until the last days of our existence, where we either extinguish completely or will go to the last stages of the subsidiary timeline and get to the gate that will lead us to the safe zones. Nobody knows. Whatever projects we engage on and whatever we choose to participate in, whether or not we continue to work with people or not. For me, for the last 20 years, I have worked with the concept of humanity and saving as much as possible strangers I didn't even know, people around the world I never really knew I never really got in contact with, but it did it for them, strangers, complete strangers, so that they too had a chance. And as the last stages of my existence, if I am to work with people, I would find it to be a very beautiful rounding up to be amongst the ones that care about me and I care about as well. And that means that if I do create safe zones, externalized inside this reality, it will be for people it matters for, that really can take it in as rounding up what we could call the beginning of my 4 cycles, working within small communities with people that mattered to me personally, not as strangers that then became important, but people that actually is in alignment with what we could say, the ideas of who and what I am and what I actually, how can I put it? Because it sounds like, oh, I'm just choosing this little group. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this correct partnership. Not something I have to teach. Not something I have to change. Not something I have to do something for. But someone, a type of otherness, a group of people that are working independently, knowingly, consciously, in full understanding of what they're doing, so that I don't have to teach. I don't have to be the first of many, but the group in itself will become the first of many groups, so that everybody who participate know their purpose, know their function, know how to work with energy, know how to work with consciousness, and are exemplifying that 24/7. And with that, I can just see the fruits of my labor, if that's possible, and rejoice and be happy about what has been achieved, however small, however big. And if that's not possible, well, there's a lot of other stuff that can be done, and life can definitely be completed in all the ways that it should, in all the kind ways that it should, and in all the harmonious, coherent patterns that are possible as individuals, as we retract and learn what's possible and what's not, and what can be unfolded and what cannot, and how we should complete with that kindness and with that balance and with that harmony, with whatever is possible and whatever is within reach. We might want to reach for the stars, but if the stars are fading away and they're no longer there to reach for, then we must take what's there and what's in front of us and turn that into our little heavens on earth, or whatever that means, and then transform and transition, transmute. And finally, when the body is old and no longer can stay and no longer can continue, transcend this physical vessel as well. And then aim for the stars through the gates of which perhaps we will be drawn back to the point of origin as part of the safe zones. And with that, complete the LPU journey and can say to those who come after, as part of our own personal history, I did the very best I could, and I did it to such a degree that I could reach my final point. At the beginning, I will go through the eye of the needle. I will leave where I came in with a lot less, but still to the core. I'm still who I used to be. I'm still my core essence. I have learned a lot, and I'll take these experiences with me to seed a new type of understanding within the progressive worlds that holds what we could call humility. That's a complete new tone. That's a complete new type of consciousness. And I'm eager to see what that can lead to and how that can become a beautiful opposition to the ones that continued, and in that be a proper opposition that creates a new dynamic between knowing it all and have absolutely no knowledge of anything, of being able to do everything and not being able to do anything, and the omnipotent creational projects and potentials, and the ones that had absolutely nothing and could do nothing and were not capable of projecting or creating anything. That, I think, is a very, very beautiful dynamic, and there can only be created a new type of synergy that will benefit all once we get through the safe zones and what is required from us there. And with that, I will end this podcast, and then we'll have the group meet up, and we will see what will come out of that. So, with that, thank you for participating in this course, and 3 more podcasts from the group meetups, and then it's time for all of us to, take stock of what we have achieved so far, where we are now, and how we want to spend the rest of our lives, what projects are important, what projects are not important, and weigh it all up against what is important and what is the most important thing of all as we are approaching the next 5 to 10 years of what is possible inside this reality field. So, take care, be well, and always do your very best to become the best version of a human you can be. Thank you.